She waits in silence, the mirror no longer lying. The face softens, men turn away. Society grows cold. What once drew attention fades into shadow. And in that shadow, you see truth stripped of illusions, merciless and undeniable. This video will reveal Schopenhauer's unflinching perspective on women, marriage, and aging, and the lessons it still whispers today. This is where Schopenhauer began. With the vanity of youth, the first truth you must confront is that beauty, though celebrated, carries its own death sentence. From the moment it blossoms, it begins to wither. Time writes its verdict not in ink, but in the very flesh it first adorned. Youth is a crown made of ice. It glitters, it blinds, it seduces. Yet from the moment it touches the head, it is already melting. Schopenhauer believed that women's power was tied to this fleeting shine, a power granted by nature, but revoked by the same hand, often brutally and without ceremony. Society plays its part in this harsh cycle. It showers applause on the young, the beautiful, the radiant. But when that currency fades, the same world turns its gaze elsewhere. What was once adored is quietly ignored. Picture this scene. A man sits at a dinner table with his wife of 20 years. The candlelight flickers across her face, illuminating lines he once swore would never appear. He remembers when her presence filled every room with gravity. Strangers turned, eyes lingered, compliments came uninvited. Now, at the very same table, he watches strangers overlook her entirely, as though she has become invisible in the theater of life. He is startled, not by her aging, but by the indifference of others. The world that once confirmed his choice now passes judgment through silence. He feels both loyalty and resentment, a mix of tenderness and a strange grief. For what vanished was not only her youth, but the illusions it carried with it. Imagine another moment. A young woman steps into a crowded street, every glance turning in her direction. She doesn't notice the stares, because she expects them. Years later, she walks the same street. This time, no one looks twice. She feels the air shift. It is not hostile, just indifferent. And indifference can feel colder than cruelty. Or take the aging couple, once united by desire, now bound only by routine. Their marriage, which began as the worship of beauty, has become a contract of habit. The foundation has eroded, leaving a structure that stands more from inertia than passion. It is here that Schopenhauer's point cuts sharp. Men, once enslaved by beauty, are released from its spell as it fades. The chains of desire dissolve, and with them, the illusions that drove so many choices. This release can feel liberating, but it also reveals a sobering truth. What you once called love may have been nothing more than intoxication with appearance. When the intoxication ends, you are left with the bare figure reality, stripped of charm, stripped of distraction. Machiavelli reminds you, men are less ashamed of being wicked than being weak. To worship beauty blindly is weakness, because it ties your fate to what cannot last. But strength lies in piercing the illusion early, before time does it for you. The Stoics echoed this wisdom. Seneca warned that the things we prize most are often borrowed, never ours keep. Youth is one of those things. So, how do you protect yourself from this trap? Begin by observing how society treats age. Spend 10 minutes in silence tomorrow, simply watching. Notice who gets attention. Notice who is ignored. Watch how beauty buys entry, and how time revokes the past. This exercise will harden your vision. It will strip away sentimentality and train you to see patterns that most refuse to name. And when you see clearly, you can choose differently. You can honor beauty without worshiping it. You can value character over appearance, knowing that only character survives the erosion of years. This is not about cynicism. It is about freedom. Freedom from illusions that weaken you. Freedom from worship that ends in disappointment. Drop this affirmation. I will not bow to illusions that time will burn away. The vanity of youth is not just a female trap, nor just a male weakness. It is a universal test. To see beyond it is to grow. To be blinded by it is to suffer. And if you fail to understand it, marriage itself becomes a mirror of this downfall, a promise built on ice, melting faster than you realize. And so the stage darkens, but another curtain rises. If beauty and youth are fleeting, what then of the institution built upon them? What remains of marriage when its illusions are stripped bare? That is where we go next. What begins as union for love often calcifies into chains of compromise and resentment. The fire that once felt eternal turns into ashes that demand sweeping. The dream becomes a duty. An illusion of marriage reveals itself in silence. Schopenhauer did not dress this truth in poetry. He saw marriage less as romance, more as nature's trap for reproduction. To him, vows were not made for happiness, but for survival of the species. You may resist this interpretation, but look closely at the patterns. You may notice how vows of eternal passion yield to endless routine, errands, and financial burdens. What was once spontaneous becomes scheduled. What was once intoxicating becomes mundane. The illusion of permanence collides with the impermanence of desire and physical allure. Passion is not built to last forever. It surges, it fades, it shifts. When beauty inevitably diminishes and desire cools, the marital contract stands exposed. It reveals itself as something practical, transactional, bound more to necessity than mysticism. Companionship remains, yes, but often overshadowed by hidden resentments, unspoken sacrifices, and unmet expectations. Picture scene. A woman stands in the attic, dust gathering on a box. She opens it carefully, lifting out a wedding dress she has not worn in decades. Her hands linger on the fabric, tracing the seam stitched with hope. For a moment she sees herself again, young, radiant, stepping into a future that glowed with promise. Downstairs, her husband sits in the living room, eyes fixed on a silent television. He no longer looks at her as he once did, nor does she at him. Their conversations have shrunk into logistical updates. Bills, groceries, grandchildren. She holds the dress closer, as though it could resurrect the magic, while he avoids her gaze entirely, as though the reminder that promise has grown too heavy. The illusion of romance still glimmers in cloth, but not in life. Another moment. A man remembers his wedding toast, the promise of forever love. 20 years later, he finds himself sleeping in separate rooms, still legally bound but emotionally estranged. The words of forever echo, not as comfort, but as irony. Or consider the couple who once traveled the world together, sharing laughter and long nights. Now their only journeys are medical appointments, their laughter replaced with quiet sighs of endurance. What began as enchantment has calcified into obligation. Machiavelli observed, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." He understood that human beings bend under circumstance. What feels eternal today may be impossible tomorrow. The Stoics, too, cautioned against confusing desire with destiny. Epictetus advised that you should only bind yourself to what lies within your control. Love, desire, even beauty, none of these will be controlled. Yet marriage often attempts to chain them, and in that attempt, suffering multiplies. The lesson is not that marriage must always fail. It is that illusions about marriage will always collapse. If you enter expecting eternal passion, you will face disillusion. If you believe beauty or desire can anchor permanence, time will prove you wrong. But if you see clearly, you can approach it with sober eyes, free of enchantment, prepared for what it truly is, a partnership of burdens as much as joys. How can you practice this awareness? Begin with a simple act. Write down one hidden cost of marriage you have witnessed in family, friends, or culture. Was it financial sacrifice, loss of freedom, or quiet resentment? See it without judgment. Naming it gives you armor. You cannot be deceived by what you are willing to face. Drop this affirmation. I will not mistake duty for eternal desire. This clarity does not make you loveless. It makes you awake. It frees you from disappointment that springs from illusion. It grounds you in what is real, what can endure, and what inevitably fades. For when you stop clinging to the fantasy, you can decide whether the reality is still worth it. But the story does not end here. For if the illusion of marriage unravels, what then remains in its ruins? What becomes a desire, power, and freedom as age advances? To see that, you must step into the next truth Schopenhauer exposed. The paradox of aging as liberation. Time strips illusions, but in the ruins of beauty, truth begins to gleam. What once enslaved you with fire and hunger becomes powerless before the cold march of years. And in that collapse, There is not only loss, but freedom. Schopenhauer saw aging not merely as decline, but as a strange liberation. Youth is ruled by desire, and desire is a tyrant that rarely sleeps. It blinds, it deceives, it leads men into follies they would otherwise avoid. But age loosens those chains. The fire cools, and with it the power of illusions. What once dictated choices loses authority, and the mind gains clarity. Aging women lose leverage in seduction, yes, but men gain the strength of detachment. The mask of charm falls away, and character, for the first time, stands exposed. Picture this. An old philosopher sits in his study late at night. Books lean against each other like tired soldiers. His candle burns low, the wax pooling in quiet resignation. He laughs softly, a laugh without warmth. He confesses, not to the room, but to himself. Only in old age did he become free. Free from the torment of longing. Free from the humiliations of lust. Free from the illusions that once bound him to faces and bodies that time would inevitably reclaim. He admits he chased beauty as though it promised immortality, only to find decay waiting beneath the veil. Now, in the stillness of age, he sees clearly, and though the body has weakened, the mind walks taller, no longer tricked by perfume or pretense. You have seen versions of this in your own life. Think of the man who once reshaped his entire existence for the promise of a woman's affection. With years, he looks back and wonders why he sacrificed so much for so little. Or think of the woman whose youthful allure once commanded rooms. Later in life, she realizes how quickly the crowd's devotion evaporated, leaving only those who valued her character still by her side. Machiavelli warned, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." He meant that clarity is not meant to wait until age. If you can strip illusions earlier, you can live free while still young. The Stoics echoed this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to see things as they are, not as he wished them to be. For what time eventually unmasks, philosophy can unveil today. And yet, aging carries its own dark gift. It equalizes. The handsome man and the radiant woman alike are reduced to the same bones. Seduction, charm, status, all meet the same dust. When stripped of illusions, what remains is character, and character alone. That is a final currency age cannot erode. You can practice this insight now. Look back at your own past infatuations. Choose one. Remember the intensity of it. Then compare that intensity to how trivial it feels in hindsight. What once felt like destiny now looks like passing weather. This distance is a gift of time, but you need not wait decades to claim it. By reflecting with honesty, you bring tomorrow's clarity into today's choices. Drop this affirmation. I am not ruled by illusions of desire. To see aging as liberation is to accept a paradox. You lose something that once defined you, but gain something that finally frees you. You shed the frantic urgency of youth and step into the calm recognition of limits. This calm is not weakness. It is strength. For only when you stop chasing mirages can you stand firmly in reality. And yet, this liberation is double-edged. For as desire fades and illusions burn away, you also confront dependency, power shifts, and a negotiation of survival. What begins as freedom can turn into fragility. That is the next truth Schopenhauer compels you to face. The silent, uneasy trade between power and dependency. Where once beauty commanded attention, age leaves many women negotiating survival and dependency. The currency of allure does not last forever, and when it vanishes, many discover how fragile their power truly was. This is the harsh economy of time. Schopenhauer saw it clearly. Beauty, the force that once opened doors, bends knees, and inspired poems, does not endure. As it fades, many women shift from seduction to survival, leaning on security instead of attraction. The power of charm is traded for stability of dependency. What once was command becomes compromise. What once was freedom becomes negotiation. Picture a widow alone in her small apartment. The walls echo with silence, and on the kitchen table lies a stack of pension papers. She clutches them with trembling hands, realizing that the beauty that once shielded her has no strength now. Strangers no longer offer favors. Opportunities no longer arrive unasked. Her survival is no longer tied to her allure, but to the bureaucratic ink of her late husband's pension. She understands in that moment that power built only on appearance dissolves when the mirror no longer flatters. You have seen this play out in other forms. A once celebrated woman, accustomed to admiration, finds herself ignored at gatherings, leaning harder on her partner's resources to maintain a lifestyle she can no longer attract. Or the man who built his worth on wealth and influence, only to discover that once his health declined, his circle shrank to nothing. Dependency is not a female fate alone. It is the destiny of anyone who builds on sand instead of stone. Machiavelli wrote, "A prudent man should always follow in the path trodden by great men." He meant, learn from the strong, do not repeat the weakness of the unprepared. The Stoics echoed the same truth. Epictetus taught that what is external can never be truly yours, and that freedom begins only when you rely on inner strength. Beauty, wealth, status, these are loans from fortune, and fortune always collects. The deeper lesson is that dependency reveals itself most brutally in marriage. What began as romance often ends as negotiation. Each partner trading not passion, but needs. The man offers security. The woman offers companionship, both haunted by fear of what they would lose alone. This is not cynical. It is simply the nature of unions built on fragile currencies. When youth and power fade, the mask of love often slips to reveal an agreement of survival. You can practice awareness of this now. Take one moment in the next day to reflect on where in your own life you rely on appearances instead of substance. Ask yourself, if the mask were removed, what strength would remain? The question itself sharpens you. It forces you to shift from illusion to essence. Drop this affirmation: I will not build my power on what time can erase. Dependency is a prison that waits for anyone who trusts fortune more than discipline. If your worth is built on looks, wealth, or external applause, time will strip it bare. But if your worth is built on skill, virtue, and character, age cannot erase it. The body weakens, yes. The influence of charm declines, yes. But the fortress of inner strength, once built, cannot be easily breached. And yet, even when illusions burn away, there is one final truth waiting. A truth more merciless than fading power, more sobering than dependency itself. For beyond security, beyond romance, beyond appearances, lies the disillusion that strips every mask, leaving only mortality. That is where the path now leads. Beyond 40, the illusions begin to crack. The myths that once carried you, the glow of beauty, the promise of eternal romance, dissolve into air. In their place stands something colder, harder, and far less forgiving: the truth of mortality. Schopenhauer wrote with ruthless clarity that women beyond 40 embody nature's indifference to individual desire. The fading of charm, the loss of allure are not personal failures, but signs of a deeper law. Nature does not care for your dreams. It moves on, stripping away illusions until only the raw bones of reality remain. Men, too, discover the same fate. Their wealth, their influence, their virility, all meet the same decline. Marriage often becomes the arena where this disillusion lands with the heaviest weight. What was once a stage for passion turns into a table of negotiation. What once was intoxicating becomes practical. The vows of forever, once radiant with youthful hope, begin to reveal themselves as arrangements of survival. Security replaces seduction. Companionship replaces desire. What seemed eternal was only temporary, wrapped in the disguise of myth. Picture this. A husband and wife sit at dinner in their quiet home. The food grows cold between them, but neither notices. No words are needed. No performance remains. Once, the table had been filled with laughter, with teasing, with stolen glances. Now silence. Not hostile, not affectionate. Just the silence of truth. They no longer need to pretend. They have seen through the illusions, and what is left is bare coexistence. It is neither glorious nor tragic. It simply is. You see the same pattern in many forms. The couple that stays together not for love, but for the mortgage and children, knowing separation would cost too much. Or the aging man, once admired for his strength, who discovers the only attention he now receives is from doctors measuring his decline. Machiavelli noted, men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. In youth, appearances are intoxicating. They fuel the illusions of passion, the masks of beauty. the theater of love. But reality always arrives, uninvited and relentless. The Stoics saw this long before Marcus Aurelius wrote that all is fleeting: flesh, wealth, power, even memory itself. To cling to appearances is to build a palace in sand. Yet within this collapse lies a rare chance. When illusions burn, clarity begins. When you stop demanding that love remain passion forever, or that beauty remain untouched, you free yourself from bitterness. You're no longer shocked by reality. You see it, accept it, and act from strength instead of denial. What seemed like loss is actually liberation. You are released from the prison of delusion. How do you practice this? In the next 24 hours, strip away one illusion in your life. Perhaps it is the illusion that someone will always save you. Perhaps it is the illusion that youth is permanent or that money guarantees happiness. Face the reality beneath it without flinching. That is your training. Drop this affirmation: I will trade illusions for truth, even when it hurts. The final disillusion is not meant to crush you. It is meant to free you from childish dreams, to wake you into adult clarity. The myths of beauty, marriage, and passion were only stories meant to carry you through the first chapters of life. Now you are tasked with something harder: to live without illusion, to build on what cannot be taken, and to walk unflinching into the shadow of mortality. And yet, beyond disillusion, something even darker waits. When illusions are gone, when clarity strips you bare, you face the one enemy that cannot be bargained with, the shadow no wisdom can dismiss, the inevitable truth of death itself.